Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality, and is about discovering your place in this great universe, from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guest, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life, and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to be with you this evening. Tonight, we are going to be talking about our lives, our choices, change, happiness, and how we are navigating our days. What decade of life are we in? How much baggage are we carrying? How can we learn to dance free? Or perhaps how can we see how the legacy we are creating today is just a joyful path? Do we need to carry so much baggage from the past? Now we're on the end of the year 2022. We're saying, I feel so much freer. I'm cleaned out my closets the past few years, got rid of jobs that I didn't need, and people and places and things that kind of drifted away into the sunset. Then we think about our legacy, and we say, but this is important. It's important. But however, can we look back at the past and maybe not romance it so much, maybe not gather it up and carry it in our purse so much, but maybe say, those are the journeys in my life, be it right or wrong, be it great, be it a pit hole in the cement, so to speak, or perhaps maybe it was just a time in my life, and I went through that experience, and that's what it was all about. As we've spoken so many times on this show before, truly when we enter this phase of our life over the age of 50, it's about saying, where am I? And not having regrets or shame or guilt, because those are emotions that are just they don't benefit us so much. So how can we see today for what it really is? Today my guest is Rosemary Schmidt. Her book is The Happy Clam. And Rosemary's book, The Happy Clam, is just about that, about being able to see I'm going forward. Let some of that stuff go behind, and I could see with my filters a little bit open today. And isn't it a wonderful ride? Rosemary, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
I am so happy to be here, Dr. Jeanette. It's an honor to be here and talking about the book, The Happy Clam, which is, like you said, kind of my legacy, kind of a lot of stuff rolled up into one thing.
Yeah, it's so wonderful, I think when people are writing books just as yours, Rosemary, because it's about being able to say, this is where I've been, this is where I am, and isn't it awesome? Sometimes, people get it and they say, but my life wasn't. Don't we really want to say, but it was? Did you miss the signs? Did you miss the joy along the way? And that's what we want to bring back into our life. Joy along the way, regardless of what's going on in our life, don't you think?
Yeah, and really being present, and I still think there's, everything happens for a reason, so even when things go badly, eventually things turn out for the better down the road, or for some reason it all comes full circle. And so just kind of keeping that perspective. And I think, as you said, at this point in our lives, looking back, we just have a far broader landscape. And so what may have seemed huge and horrible in our 20s or 30s or even 40s, you get beyond a certain point, and it's like, well, that pales in comparison to other stuff we've been through.
Right. It's even funny because, I see a lot of this stuff on social media, and they'll say, well, did you ever go here? Did you ever go there? Do you know this person or that person? And what I say to them? Man, I'd love to have your memory because I have no clue. I know the year I was there, but I don't need to worry about where I was, what I did, and all of that. And so I think sometimes the drifting of our memory and our stories into the sunset is kind of a gift. Do you think?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, memory, and because I think, of course, experiencing kind of a different kind of take on that with my mother and going through the past with her dementia and the loss of memory, and then the things that stick in memories. And it's funny, the things that stick really deep, like music and smells, and that even though so many things would be forgotten, the things that would be remembered, and how music always, she came, to life, when there was music or concerts.
Right. Yeah, I think sometimes the idea of our memory, that is who we are. But in essence, when our memory does start to dissipate or change or shift, we get a little bit of fear. But then the next thing is, how can we just enjoy the present? Because as I've worked so much, with end-of-life patients and, with memory and a lot of really, really difficult struggles and diseases, I think really it was about bringing into, what can I do today? How can I breathe today and enjoy today? Because just as I shared with my son before this phone call, I says, oh, Josh, we weren't meant to be 100, but if you go, would you make sure you take me out the same day, because we're pretty good at that, So I think our idea of the fear of that next step, when we can work through that ourselves, it really gives us a clear idea to be able to enjoy today with a little bit more happiness or joy or ease or self-care. Do you think that's a possibility?
Absolutely. And I think there are just so many different dimensions of joy and happiness and what people seek for comfort. And some things are the simplest, like physical, small things you can do to tweak your physical surroundings, whether it's spraying lavender in the air or the smell of lemon or citrus or cookies or banana bread, and to all other different levels. But the number one, I guess, spoiler alert, the number one thing to boost, happiness and well-being is people. Just other people, like the relationship you have with your son, for example. They're really just the cornerstone of a happy life, and don't you think?
Oh yeah, so much. Even when memory starts to fade, if you sit and you hold a hand of a loved one, I mean that's a golden moment. You actually don't need to have words or stories. You don't need to have engagement in going out and doing all these things so you can create another memory. You just need that moment, do you think?
Agreed. I remember one time, going to visit my mom at the nursing home after we had moved her out here to Massachusetts, and we arrived in the afternoon. They were having a concert in the courtyard, and we got there as they were bringing, the folks into the courtyard. And my mom just looked at me and said, oh, you always come at just the right time, and held my hand. And that was kind of a neat moment, for example.
Yeah, and you know what? And just as you said that, Rosemary, I just had this glimpse of that's your connection to her, that you'll always be there at the right time. So she's saying there that I'm always here for you at the right time. Do you think sometimes when people, when they pass on and they transition, we say, how do we connect with them? How do we notice it? Do we have to have material things on this world to be able to remember them by and then be in sadness and grief? Or can we connect to their spirit and have joy in knowing that they're around us? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think some physical things are sweet reminders, but I think you're right. The focus is far more on the memories and kind of connection with them. I think, one thing, with my mom would be her cooking. I don't think I ever realized when I was a kid, but just what an amazing cook she was. And in fact, in the book, I share the pizza recipe, for example. But it was also kind of telling, growing up, we didn't have tons of money and stuff, but I didn't, it didn't And she apologized. We were in the nursing home, and she was saying something like that. Oh, one year, you got comic books for Christmas, I think. And I'm like, no, but we never felt terribly poor. We always ate really, really well, and things we had like the pizza. We had pizza a lot because our family had the pizza shop, of course.
Right. Yeah, I think it's so interesting because, even my kids will say to me, my daughter said to me one day, she says, I didn't even realize we were poor because you always made it so different. And I think that's really where we say, how are we enjoying the fruits of our labor today? How can we be happy with what we have and in gratitude and in sheer joy, regardless of our circumstances? Don't you think that sometimes when we look back at our life, we want to nitpick and pull out all the bad things, but if we can look back and say, yeah, we were, but did you remember? I mean, how many ways can I make a bag of rice? And my daughter would laugh. She'd say, yeah, Mom could take a bag of white rice and make it a zillion different ways, But that's a joyful thing then, and that's a joyful memory, right?
Exactly. And, in fact, it's kind of one of the weird things that has come out of the pandemic that people have spent more time with their families. And I remember talking to, one of my coworkers after a few months into it, and kind of the appreciation for being able to be home with his wife and his sons, and saying, I can't imagine going back to the way it was.
Right.
I miss this. I savor this time with them. And 2019 is gone, and it's not coming back, and it's kind of a new way of living, I guess.
You know what I absolutely loved in your book, Rosemary? And again, the book is The Happy Clam. I loved when you talked about the meat grinder. Now, I'll tell you my story about the meat grinder, and then you could tell me yours. But we had a meat grinder. My grandmothers had a meat grinder, my Polish-Lithuanian grandmother, because she made koshi, it's called. It's a potato, onion, garlic, and Crisco kind of stuffing. For Thanksgiving. Because, it was like everybody had lard, everybody had potatoes because they were in the ground, and everybody had rice and garlic, and that's what they put in it. That's what it was. And you would always go over there and, put the potatoes through the meat grinder for her, And then generations went on, and we used the hand grater. But I always knew that the meat grinder made the best stuffing, But, of course, we never had it was never passed down into the family or anything. But when I saw the meat grinder there, I said, oh, my gosh, isn't that exciting that we remember that little bit of piece? Because every Thanksgiving that I make that stuffing, I'll say, this is the most unhealthiest dish in the entire world, but I'm going to do it, and I'm going to make it to honor my ancestors. So I think sometimes we say, we take that meat grinder out, like you may, is if you take it out and you hold on to it, you can almost feel those memories start to flood in, but you also, too, can feel them around, because every time I make the stuffing, every year never fails. One ingredient gets left out. There's only like 10 ingredients, but one ingredient always gets left out, and we always laugh about it. And we say, I wonder which ancestor that was that always forgot that, don't you think?
Oh, that's funny. One of the days, so that conversation with my mom at the nursing home, and that talking about how, we always had, we didn't feel poor because you always cooked so great, not only the pizza, but, the big ham dinners and everything and garlic salad. And she looked at me and said, because she had downsized from her apartment to, different apartments and stuff, and ultimately the nursing home multiple times, she looked at me and said, well, do you have my meat grinder? And I was like, somewhere. It is somewhere. And because she always made, after the big ham dinner, she'd make ham salad sandwiches. And then you'd put through the grinder, the meat grinder, you'd put ham and pineapple, and then you'd use the sweet gherkin pickles, and then some mayonnaise. And so, but here we are out in Massachusetts. Ham salad is very much a Midwest thing, and I had to kind of redirect her, and that's another thing. But I had to kind of get her mind off the meat grinder because I wasn't going to be able to produce the meat grinder in front of her. I said, "Oh yeah, the ham salad. Maybe they have it here at the cafeteria. Here at the nursing home."
Right.
Thinking, "Oh my gosh, there's no way out here they have ham salad. I've just made up something." But we actually got to the little cafe, and these are maybe the small miracles I talk about. We got there, and they actually had ham salad sandwiches.
Oh, wow.
And so she was delighted. I was shocked, and we enjoyed the ham sandwiches like crazy. It was so good, and it was a miracle.
Because it really brought, a memory forward so you could create another memory, and that's the memory that you'll remember is like, how wonderful. So really she created a sign for you to remember, you know what I mean? So that's really so cool. I think sometimes we pass by these little joys in our life and we don't even notice them. It's sort of like people would always say, stop and smell the roses, and then it got to be, go out and hug a tree, and then it got to be, did you notice the sky today, you know what I mean, or the sunset. So it's trying to prep us to remember really what's going on around us. People, places, things, nature, and joy and memories, and just to be able to be in the present and enjoy it, and to be just really thoughtful about the moment. Isn't that what happiness is about?
Well, being present, and I think really keeping things in perspective, that something that you take to heart today. So it's hard because we don't want to tell people to not care. I mean, people... we want people to be engaged and caring, but to not let stuff get to you to such a degree that you can't enjoy life and go on, and that, whatever circumstances that anybody's in, I want them to take away the message that things can get better. No matter, where they're at, that things can always get better. And to have hope. And that change begins small, with small things. I think if you're sitting there and you're just seeing like, my life is such a mess, and I'd like it to be so much different, it's too hard, right? It's a bridge too far, and so it's better to think about small changes, incremental change. That's one of the things I talk about in the book a lot. Just kind of move the needle a tick and start going in a better direction.
It's really cool you talk about, people saying their life is a mess. They'll say, fantastic. How many junk drawers do you have in your house? And they'll say, I don't know. We go in and we look at their house, and it's a bunch of junk drawers, and different things. I say, this is a great thing. So, what we're going to do? We're going to clean out one junk drawer today. And then once you do that.
Right. You can't, if you go, if you think, we're going to completely clean the house stem to stern,
right.
It's just too daunting. So just start with one drawer. Exactly.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because I had spoken to another friend the other day, and I said, I almost feel like I want to have a European closet. And I don't know if you might know that. Europeans, they have really teeny closets, like, in the old houses that used to have just enough to hang up a few clothes and, maybe one shelf. And that's really all we need.
Here in New England.
Yeah, and she says to me, but I couldn't live that way. And I'm like, well, I can. I think I have 3 pairs of shoes, so I'm well on my way. I don't need all of that stuff. And I think once we start to come to that point, it also clears out our mind. It clears out our I should, I must, I have to, I need to, all of those things. And once you start clearing out all of that space, you start saying, what next? And you start to enjoy what comes to you versus controlling what you think you have to. Maybe?
Mm-hmm. I was thinking about that this morning, actually, that, once something falls into the I should column, it really, you talk about loss of joy, right?
Yeah.
That even if it's something you're like, yes, I want to do it, and all of that, but it feels like you should. It really does. It seems like it diminishes it.
Yeah. It's almost as if it feels like it's no longer in your creative perception. It's more in your, it's almost like this material thing that kind of bogs you down, don't you think?
Do lists at the start of each week, and kind of my mindset is if I put it on a list, it'll get done eventually. And but you can almost become a slave to your list, and maybe you have to kind of redo or reframe your list and put the things that really, really, really matter at the very top, right? And the things that bring you joy and feed you and nourish your soul and heart and mind.
I always used to do a list, and I got away from it for a while, and then I went back to it, and I noticed that if I set it to the side and didn't look at it every day, so to speak, by the end of the week or the end of the month, some of those things had taken care of themselves, and at the end of the month, I said, those were so unimportant, and I would have wasted my time on those, but yet I did something else, and it brought me greater joy. So sometimes we think we have to or should have or would have. It does take up our time.
In one part of the book, I talk about where in the early days of becoming a supervisor, I was working long hours and remembered thinking, I really need to change things. I really need to change, but how, right? Because every time I stayed late or did one more email, I was making those decisions. I was making those choices and choosing the life I was living, and kind of wearing myself out.
Yeah. Let's talk for a second. In your book, you talk about healthy, wealthy, and wise. And I think a lot of times people will say, but I'm none of those, and then they get, they're not able to reframe what they are thinking or what they felt or how they have a choice in the future. They're stuck with, I'm not that, and they say, oh, well, I'll never be. Yet, no matter if you have a chronic disease, if you're at end of life, if you have had a lot of struggles in your life, you can still be healthy, wealthy, and wise for one moment, for an hour a day, for an hour a month. It's up to you to make that choice about how you use your perception to perceive what's going on within you and around you. Do you think maybe just changing perception sometimes is the name of the game?
Absolutely. I think it might be in that chapter or maybe one of the others, but the concept that even if you're in a lousy, situation, condition, there's a quote by Oscar Wilde, where it says, we're all lying in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars. Right. And so even if things are bad, if you can be looking for, for the stars, that there is still good and what joy there is to be found and what miracles, even a ham salad sandwich can be a miracle.
Right.
And it definitely is about mindset. And there's a lot to be said for, how changing your mindset and your attitude can also kind of chart the course. It can kind of set the compass bearing and prepare you to be more positive and, more proactive, less reactive. It's hard, somebody says something to you and if you take it to heart and you react, and yet if you could step back and instead, give them some grace and say, well, maybe they're having a bad day, and not take it to heart. Was it really meant personally? Maybe it wasn't. Even if it was, even more so, that's the time not to take it personally. And it's that balance of how do you care but not be overly bothered by things.
Right. Let's talk for a second in your chapter about focus on what you can do. And I wrote on the top of it to be in the flow and to learn how to dance. I think sometimes we say, but I can't do it because, and it's right there. I can distinctly remember a story. I used to work at an allied health facility where, people would go in and they were there pretty much for a very long extended time to be able to heal from hips or broken bones or whatever that might be, or from spinal injuries or whatever. And a gentleman, he had asked the nurse for a pencil. And he took every napkin that came with his meal and drew pictures because he was an artist. He drew pictures on his napkins. And I'll never forget, that was just a perfect example of do what you can do with what you have. And I had taken my son and I said, let's get some colored pencils and an art, tablet, and we're going to take it to this man. So I had gone in on my day off and I took it to him. And, of course, I got fired for that because you're not supposed to be able to help people. But at any rate, he was so overjoyed that someone would think that what he was doing had value. I think sometimes when we are doing things, we want to say, is anyone noticing? Am I still here? And when we have end of life, or we have memory loss, or we have a chronic disease, or even if we have a lot of challenges in life, not many people are around, just as your mother, with the nursing home thing. Not as many people are around who you want to know that you're still seeing, that someone is still saying, yo, I see you. That's awesome. Do you think sometimes people are looking for that and we don't even notice that we can provide that service to others?
That's probably the number one thing that we can do for each other is be there for each other. It's like the George Eliot quote, what are we here for if not to, make life better for each other. I may have that quote off a little bit, but what else, what better reason, to be here? Because I think we're all kind of like on that, like Horton Hears a Who, that Dr. Seuss story, the little who's down in, no, that's a different story. Right. But Horton the elephant finds a dust particle it turns out there's an entire community living on it, and that we're all just trying to be heard and seen and feel that we matter and belong. I think belonging is a huge part of it. Yeah.
It's really the best part of existence, I think we wear a lot of cloaks of shame or guilt, or we did something wrong, or our name, or who we are, or what our family or legacy or whatever it is all about, and sometimes we get so entrenched into all of that oldness and those stories that we can't even see going forward. I think when you use the word change in the book, and I think change, sometimes we say, oh, I was doing it wrong. Do I have to do it right now? I think maybe sometimes we want to say, change is saying, can we find the dance of existence and enjoy it, regardless of if it's harsh or not, but can we just enjoy whatever comes to us versus saying we need to judge it as right or wrong and it's of my own doing? Maybe?
Yeah, I think just that there is no right answer, and it's just all kind of part of the human experience, and whatever you go through, if nothing else, it helps you understand, what others have gone through as well, and you can relate to others who go through it later, and have just a better understanding of all the spheres of what it is to be a human on this planet right now.
Yeah. I think, if anything, we look back at the last several years and with the pandemic, and just as you shared, about people being home more and enjoying their families more, I think we've kind of come to the idea of facing death, facing a possibility of something out of our control, facing the change in life or the unexpected, as we've seen many people have transitioned, at a clip, and we didn't even realize. The idea of I'm going to drive someone up to the front door of the hospital and I might never see them again, and I can't help them and support them. I think the idea is that how can we just be comforted ourselves, how we can care for ourselves, how we can say this body is a vehicle and it's got a limited time on it, but I'm good with that, and we're all going to be okay in the long run. Might that shift our idea of change or fear and bring us to be really joyful people in the moment, regardless of what's there?
Yeah.
Let's take a break for a moment, and we will be right back.
Today we discuss many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit dr-jeanette-gallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.
And, absolutely, just being, aware of it's a much longer landscape, broader landscape, and to be okay with whatever comes, come what may, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a funny story about the book, writing the book, finishing the book, in the midst of this kind of start of the pandemic, in retrospect. I'd actually taken the month of February off to work on the book and hit save that Friday, I think, February 28th. And then things went badly quickly in March, and we're to the point where it was starting to circulate here and possible exposure. And
right.
And I'd started feeling some symptoms myself, and that I had never felt before. And the thought ran through my head, well, no, I can't get sick and die. The book isn't done. And it was the most irrational thought ever, right? And then I'm like, well, of course I could. There's no guarantee that I'm going to finish anything. And, we were talking about lists earlier, and this constant craving to check things off, and realizing, no, everything might not get done, right? And scary. You're right. Like you said, dropping somebody off at the hospital, or having a FaceTime thing with your doctor, and the doctor saying, this is new, and there are no cures, and standard symptoms, and it's like, okay.
Right.
So a lot of uncertainty.
There sure is, and I think that just as we're saying, I even had said to my son, I said, man, I really felt lousy last week, and I had a fleeting thought, oh, darn, if I have a heart attack today, I didn't get to wear those new pants I just bought last week. and what it did is it shifted my perception, and I just laughed. But I felt joy for the moment, and I felt good for the second, and it kind of, that thought or that symptom or that whatever came into my head left. So I think the idea is that it is that easy, and I always say it is that easy. I've always shared the story of my one patient that I had, and she allowed me to share the story. And I had gone to her, and she said, I really need some help. I just got out of the hospital, and I went to her house, and oh my goodness, there were so many machines and drugs and everything there. And I said, it took me one day just to figure everything out and kind of get a grip on it. And I left at the end of the day and said, I don't have a grip on it. The next day I said, okay, well, let's put a plan. And we started to work on that. At the end of the day, we couldn't get a plan together. The next day I said, what do you really want? And she says, I know what I want. I want a new heart. And I said, well, how are you going to get that? She says, well, here's the doctor's name, and he's downtown. I said, okay. And I took the doctor's name, and I called him up, and I told him who I was and what my patient needed. He says, okay, come down tomorrow. I went, oh, okay, this doctor from France is in New Orleans, and he wants her to come down tomorrow, and he's super famous, and, this has got to be okay. So we went down, and I'd spoken to him, and we went through all of her work and stuff like that, and all of her chart and stuff. And he turned to her and he says, I suggest you enjoy today. And she said, am I going to die today? He says, not today, my dear, but I suggest you enjoy your days. And, within a week or two, she went into the hospital, and, she was on the downside, and I took her donuts and, tomatoes because that's what she wanted. And when it came to her final moments, the hospital says, you have your choice. And I said, you make your choice. And all of her friends at 3 o'clock in the morning had a huge party for her at her house. They brought her home in the ambulance at 3 in the morning, and she had a huge party with balloons and cake and Christmas lights and all this stuff, and all of her people and family and friends. They helped her exit the world. So I think that we say it truly is up to us to shift the perception of our moment however we want to, because whatever we thought it was from the past, and we've seen it as such, we don't have to live there. Mm-hmm. Do you think that might be an option, to be able to say, keep telling us stories of how it can be, so we can kind of shake away some of that old dust?
Absolutely. Reframing things, and just because all you have is today, and be present enough to enjoy what's here in front of you today, and make the best of every situation. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm always the best person of, as we live in here, again, I'll say it as we live here in New Orleans, it's all about being able to celebrate life. It's not about, mourning the dead. It's about celebrating life here. And I've really always been like that. I think I just came in with that. And when you bring, a birthday cake and hats when someone's, at the end of their time, it's not for everybody, but it is for many people if you allow them the freedom to say, I'm unburdened. Mm-hmm. Do you think maybe we should unburden ourselves a little bit sooner than the end of life?
I think I agree. I think it's kind of funny. My previous book was actually Go Forward Support about rugby, but the concept was to be both weighted and naked in a way, and that in some ways we carry all this baggage and every experience, preceding today, we carry those with us. They're indelibly marked on our being. And yet every day is an absolute, you're opening it up, brand new, fresh, blank slate, and having that possibility that it could be different from what you've done in the past. And and again, these changes made by the decisions we make every day. And so to make a conscious decision to do something a little bit to change our environment, to, reach out and talk more and engage more with people in our lives, that those little differences can add up over time.
I think it's, in closing, Rosemary, too, on the front of your book, the woman that is running, with her shorts and her T-shirt on, it's sort of like I see it as you're just running. Hold on. You're just enjoying each day, being free and being out there and just, running as you are in life and just enjoying it. That's truly what the metaphor, I think, about the happy clam. Even when you think about a clam, that water comes in all the time and keeps filtering out the clam, keeps clearing things out all the time. So it's just an enjoying another moment. Do you think that's what your cover's all about?
Yes, and in fact, the title of the painting by Carol Ost is Fearless. And I think there's a lot to be said about fearlessness and happiness kind of dovetailing and working together, that you just go forward and you just keep facing each day and approaching it and bringing your best energy and everything that you've brought with you from the past, and maybe filtering that too and putting it in perspective and just going into each day fresh.
Yeah, because I think when you use the word fearless, people say, well, I'm not that strong, I'm not that powerful, I'm not this, that, or the other. And I'll say, let's flip it around and say, less fear. Can you work with that? And they're like, oh, okay, I could do less fear. Right? Yeah, because I think when you do less fear, it's sort of like, I'm going to clean out all my drawers tomorrow, or I'm just going to make sure I've only got 3 pairs of shoes in my closet because I really only need 3 pairs, And I think the idea is that perhaps it's going to be okay if we lean on each other. And when we start to say, how can I let go of some of this fear? When you're leaning with someone versus leaning on them, when you're leaning with them, that's how you become stronger and you learn to support yourself. Versus leaning on them, that's when you feel a little bit not so being able to make it the next day. So we really want to teach people that to be able to lean with others versus leaning on them. Do you both think?
I think we can all, being there for each other and being stronger, together. I think that's the spirit of the book.
Yeah, it's kind of awesome in a way when we say that we can really construct our lives so differently than our ancestors have. But they've really taught us, oh my gosh, they've had their own ways, but their own ways were even more awesome if they look back at their ancestors before them. So really, each decade and generation has been evolving. And when we look at how we are evolving, and even you and I having this conversation today, probably if we had this conversation maybe even 10, 20 years ago, people would say, you got 10 heads. I don't even know what you're talking about, right? I think we're just evolving so much. So, Rosemary, can you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your work?
Sure. So the Happy Clam is available at a pretty wide number of independent bookstores and, of course, on the big ones online. And if folks wanted to read more, I also do a blog where I kind of write periodically about just kind of, current events, ongoing stuff. And the name of the blog is rosebudsblog.com. And you can also get there by the gainline.com. That's the publishing company. So
very good.
That's out there.
Very good. And I think it's really great, Rosemary, in closing, to talk about your book, The Happy Clam. As I shared with you before, I said that it really felt like you were writing your legacy book. I think sometimes people will say, well, I don't have anything to say. Well, really what you've showed us through writing in your book is that write down whatever comes to you and just string it together. Even myself, I've probably got over maybe 80,000 photographs. I've probably got hundreds of thousands of pages, written. And it's like, people say, put it in a book, and I'm like, I can't. So you know what you do?
Maybe you should.
Yeah. So what I really said is I'm just going to put it as excerpts of life. You know what I mean? And I think that's what sometimes when people say, well, maybe I'll just write it down, and that's all you need to be able to share your own legacy story. Do you think?
Yes, and really the book started as kind of a collection of ideas, and also we talked about clams, or filtering. Clams are filter feeders, and so they just kind of feed on the stuff that's in the passing current. And so I've just kind of collected all of these things and ideas and put them in some sequence, and like I said, I didn't really know that I had another book to write, but I'd actually called the bank to talk about whether I should get some kind of a loan to do all of this stuff and that. And the banker was no typical banker. She said, I have a feeling, just, keep writing. And even if this first book doesn't go anywhere, you need to write that second book. And I'm like, this was years ago before I'd even started this book.
Right.
And she said, no, I just have a feeling you've got to write that second book. And I'm like, I don't know, I clung to that for many years. It just was never a sure thing that was going to happen. And so if it comes back to change and how do people make change, and I got to tell you, the hardest part is starting anything, whether it's writing a book, stopping smoking, starting to eat better, starting to exercise. If people are thinking about exercise, go watch the movie, what is it? Courtney Runs a Marathon, and you start with running one block, and that's all you do. But the hardest part is starting, and that. So now I just kind of wanted to get that out there as well.
It's so important, yeah. Even if your collection of your artwork is on napkins, staple them all together. Do you know what I mean? Or put them in a box. Or even if your notes are something you scribble down all the time on just little pieces of paper, put them together and leave them in a box. That's your legacy. That's what you can look back and reflect on. And others can assist you when your memory starts to fail. They can look through that box and say, oh, let's talk about this. What is this about? So I think your legacy always is an important factor in sharing with those around you, even if they aren't your regular family or those who grew up with you. Do you think?
Yeah, I think in a way you're right. You know, this book, I'll go back to it. And I wrote this as much for myself as for the world, as far as good advice and perspectives on things. And that was the impetus for writing it, is just wanting to share it with the world and getting it out there. And what's inside, whether it's a picture, a painting, a poem, you know, it's putting it out there and putting it out there for the world. And it's all kind of part of who we are.
Absolutely. Well, Rosemary, it was such a pleasure to have you with us today to share about your book, and we thank you so much for joining us.
No, the pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much, Dr. Jeanette.
So happy to have you. If you'd like to find out more information about The Happy Clam by Rosemary Schmidt, again, the book is listed on the bottom of today's show page, so you can find out more information and go directly to her blog to be able to read what she shares. And it's really about being able to discover the universe of possibility. Everything is out there for us. We just say, I'm going to take off my sunglasses today. I know the sun is nice. I know the sun is bright, but I'm just going to tip my face to the sun and enjoy its warmth. There's so much in the energy in the world around us. Just step out and say, whoops, I'm going to forget about those shoes today and I'm going to go outside. I'm going to forget about my coat. I'm going to see what it feels like to be a little cool or cold. I'm going to go outside and experience. That's what the book is all about. The Happy Clam is about our experiences in life, how we enjoy them, how we stumble with them, how we can share with others what our feelings were about, just to open up others to say, can you share your story too? That's what it's all about. What is your story, and how would you like to be sharing it? Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher. Until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit dr-jeanette-gallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.